Just as the Monkees were forming, two folk groups out of New York were disbanding. The Journeymen, featuring John Phillips, and the Mugwumps, which included Denny Doherty and a force of nature named Mama Cass Elliot. After a little convincing from Cass and a move to LA, the Mamas and the Papas were born.
My mom's home was really the center of a lot of happenings in Laurel Canyon.
She was famous for putting people together. She was very friendly, very funny, very hip and witty. So she met Eric Clapton when he was with Cream, didn't know a soul in LA, and he's very shy. And she said, well, come to my house tomorrow afternoon. I'll have some friends over and we'll have a little barbecue in the backyard.
Among Cass's friends that day was David Crosby, who brought along a singer he had just found in Florida, Joni Mitchell.
She invited Mickey Dolenz to come, and Mickey brought his camera, 16mm camera. Throughout this whole afternoon, I was photographing this stuff going on. Mickey was filming away. And so years later, I thought, oh, Mickey, you must have some great shots. Probably there's pictures of me photographing Eric Clapton and Joni Mitchell. And he said, no, not really.
And if you look at the footage now, it's just ridiculous. It's flowers and the dog and beer cans in the ashtray, and I'm like, you know, Eric, move! And I got all this 16mm footage of like rack focus from the flower to the cigarettes.
Sadly, there's no footage of the actual icons from this historic day at Cass Elliot's house. Thanks, Mickey. In the fickle world of music, it wasn't unusual for bands to break up and its members to regroup with other musicians. But in 1968, two very special relationships formed, and they would make a lot of beautiful music together.
The Crosby, Stills and Nash blend had been brewing for a while.
Stephen put together the Buffalo Springfield, and then of course David Crosby was in the Byrds.
But fighting within the groups caused Stills to leave and Crosby to be kicked out. So the two decided to form their own short-lived group, the Frozen Noses. It was during this time that Crosby, on a trip to Florida, discovered a fair-haired Canadian folk singer named Joni Mitchell. So impressed by her musical brilliance, he brought her back to LA and over to Mama Cass's house.
And Joni sat there under a tree playing her entire first album. They were just recording it at that time. No one knew her, no one had heard of her.
With Joni moving into the neighborhood and Crosby and Stills singing together as a duo, Mama Cass made a connection that would make music history in more ways than one.
Mama Cass knew they needed another voice, even if they didn't. And she also knew that Graham Nash was not very happy in the Hollies. So she got Graham Nash to come over to David Crosby's house one day and meet David and then Stephen, and they famously sang together. The first song they sang together, they knew.
Along the way, another Buffalo Springfield member, Neil Young, would also become part of the group. Sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, and then Stephen and Neil famously were always having a fight, and Neil was always leaving the group.
Just prior to Crosby, Stills and Nash forming, another relationship blossomed between Graham Nash and Joni Mitchell.
Those two people found each other. They're both such wonderful, sweet souls. And it was very sweet and very beautiful. It seemed perfect.
I do remember hanging with Graham when he lived with Joni down the street. They were literally, I could almost see their house from mine.
It's a very fine house.
It was a lovely little, very fine house with a cat and the thing and the fire.
Sadly, the relationship wouldn't last. The song Willie on Mitchell's Ladies of the Canyon album and Nash's song Simple Man both speak of the relationship's demise. Though this group of relationships came with tumultuous times and heartbreak, Joni Mitchell, Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young have given us some of the most beautiful music of all time. When the Legends of Laurel Canyon continues.
He was actually the guy that every single musician looked up to and said, this guy is an absolute genius.